Welcome along once again to the Cardiff City phone-in. Not the result I expected on the weekend, to be honest. I was totally amazed by the result. Before the game, Nigel Harris posted something to say he was in the pub. He said, I might have a couple more before I go to the game. I said, well, unless the Southampton players are in there with you, Evan, if you stay as long as you like. But then we pulled off that incredible result. But there we go. On the panel tonight, we got Simon Richards. Welcome back, Simon.
Evening, Steve. Always a pleasure to be here, especially after a win, which always a positive thing to start with.
It doesn't happen that often at home, so yeah, we can't plan that one. Steve Wiggy Wiggins is with us again. Hi, Steve.
Evening, Steve. Nice to see you all, guys.
And Dave Sugarman. Thanks, Dave, for coming on the show tonight. I'll tell you what, Dave. I'll go to you first. Actually, the result on the weekend. I loved being there. It was just fantastic. For that golden moment, which I'll certainly remember for a long time, and Kian Ashford will remember for even longer. He hit the ball at the back of the net. Next thing you know, there he is at the Canton end in front of the fans of the club that he loves, and they won the match. But so in terms of it being a great result, it was a fantastic result. Southampton really should have battered us, though, really, shouldn't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, we could easily have been 4 down at half time or something stupid like that. But they kept going, and the fact was that City did create a couple of chances in the first half, and the whole kind of the whole setup was far more adventurous than it usually is when we play opposition of any sort of caliber, never mind Southampton's caliber. Now, I know that was forced upon Bullet to a large degree by the injuries and what have you, but nevertheless, they gave it a go from the word go. They actually had a go at Southampton at various times. I mean, Turnbull had a chance with a header in the first half, which at the time I didn't think was, I thought a half chance. But when I saw the replay at half time, that was actually a really good chance. If he'd headed it back across the keeper, he could well have scored. But yeah, I mean, we should have been battered realistically by half time. But they kept going. They nicked the goal against the run of play. And from that point, I was delighted to see that Russell Martin just completely had a wobbly. He took off 3 of their best players on the day, made a raft of substitutions, changed everything around, completely lost his head. And from that point onwards, realistically, the last 20 minutes, although that Southampton are going to be dangerous, City actually looked the more likely, So, I thought it was a great end to the game. Hopefully,
it was a great end game. Yeah,
Ashford can go on. They speak about him very highly at the club.
Yeah,
and so hopefully he can go on to make something of himself, and we can all say we were there when it started. So
yeah. The only thing which disappointed me, Steve, with Kian, I'm trying to remember who it was. There's been a couple of City players over the years who've done this. In the olden days when we had a fence, it was kind of helpful, because you could jump on the fence and be part of the crowd, He didn't quite go the whole hog, He did the ITOL and then controlled himself and stepped back, Should have been in the crowd for my money.
It was brilliant to see, Steve, wasn't it? And like we said before we came on air, it's just nice to see a homegrown Cardiff City player punching the badge, showing a bit of enthusiasm. But his the interview after the game as well, he was just, you could see he'd obviously dreamt of that moment. He scored a lot of goals for the under-21s, and he's come into the first team. And it went in off the bloke's arse, but I mean, you don't buy a ticket, you don't win the raffle, and it was just a pleasure to see the joy on that kid's face when he put the ball in. But you know what? I'd love to see him up top with a centre forward playing 2 together, because I think, I think his natural position is centre forward, Steve, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think he can obviously also play wide. I mean, we'll come on to that a bit later on, Steve, because next season we could have several really young players to choose from. A comment coming here, Simon, just to say there's a barcode on your screen. I don't know whether that's significant or people are buying products while you're on. I don't know, but anyway, Paul Williams. Hi, Paul. The result was a game changer for Bullet, as in career in or out. It's a shame he didn't do a game changer on players weeks ago, because his hand was forced on this occasion.
Sometimes,
Simon.
yeah.
But
sometimes this happens.
That would have happened otherwise.
Yeah, well, you get a crisis, and the issue is that we've had on social media for weeks, months, whatever, people calling for the young players to start, especially since we've been out of contention really for relegation and realistically the playoff part of the league as well. So we kind of treading water in the middle of the league, and people have been shouting for the young players to come in. But of course, Bullet is still playing for his contract. Every single win or every single point is massively important for him. If he's in a position where he wants to stay at the club and his whole team do, then he won't have that kind of freedom to play the youngsters, because until that is sorted, he'll fear for his future. So the injuries have obviously come along, and they've forced his hand. And this sometimes happens at clubs, isn't it? There's a crisis, and a young player comes on and becomes the hero. And there's not much, I don't think, that really kind of boys supporters and young local lads coming on, scoring goals, punching about, like you said. I think that's absolutely huge. And looking into next season, there's some really exciting young players coming through at the club. Obviously, you've got Davis, who's just hit double figures out in. Like, anyone want to have a go at this? Is it Kajovic? I can't even pretend.
Korchik, I think it is.
That's the one. Yeah,
I'm going to go with Dave's impersonation of the name there, Simon.
I think that sounds perfect. Yeah, just edit that in. But yeah, I think it fantastic, and it does. And again, there were polls 3-4 weeks ago on X amongst Cardiff fans, Bullet stay and go. That some fairly recently it was 50-50. But we're now on this run where we're second in the form table, I think, in the last 10 games. We've got the most wins outside the top 6. It's a huge. I mean, I think about 95% now of Cardiff fans of recent polls want him to stay. This result really cemented that, massively. I think, and I don't know what Tan's playing at. Either you want him or you don't. If you don't know by now, you'll never know. I mean, there's only a couple of games left. It seems sort of a little cruel on him to not, if they haven't, to not clarify his future and where it lays as well. I think I'm often confused by Tan's business acumen. He's made himself into a billionaire, but some of his sort of decision making often confuses me. And I think this is just, on a personal level, it's pretty rough on Bullet if he still doesn't know whether Cardiff is going to be his home next season.
Did you see the reaction from him when that goal went in, when he jumped into the other guy's arms?
Yeah, completely. And it might be in the back of his mind. He might, he could well be considering that goal could well get him that contract, that 2-3 year contract. And not all the football's not been superb all season. Let's be honest. There's been some dirge that has been served up as well, and that's why there's been that question on his future, I guess, and that's why that question is continuing now. But you just want some stability in the club. We just want a manager to be able to build, and he's certainly shown enough, I think, to be given that 12-24 month contract and hopefully build next season.
So I'm going to take that you're voting for Bullet to stay, yeah?
Yeah, but I can't be bothered going for another manager. I'm tired. I want stability. Yeah, I definitely. I think he's done enough. I was January, February time. You're thinking, it's a tough call, but I think he's shown enough. Those, as I say, that the position at the form table and the position we're in compared to last season, I think he's shown enough to be given the chance. I think to have a transfer window.
So we've hit 62 points, Dave. Yeah, 62 points, and we was talking about the mythical 50 point figure. Obviously, significantly better than last season. The jury's still out. The jury's still out for me. I think this jury's still out, and I think it's ominous. With 2 games left, when you think what happened to Lamucci, with 2 games left, there's no word from the big cheese kind of thing. What if we'd lost 3 or 4-1 on the weekend, I loved us winning it, and it was great, but we could easily have lost, and nobody would have been surprised if we got battered by Southampton. They're one of the very best sides in the division. If they won on the weekend, they'd have been knocking on the door of automatic promotion to the Premiership. Yeah. So if we had lost, would it have been, there we are, he's a goner? How important was it, Dave, for us to sneak that result?
I've honestly got no idea, but I don't think any of us do. I think there's this Bullet debate is full of so many imponderables. You know, I had a massive row a couple of weeks ago with a good friend of mine in the pub after the Hull game, when he was saying, well, Bullet should get a new contract regardless because he's done the job that he was brought here to do. And I said, none of us have got any idea what job he was brought here to do because we weren't part of the interview process. The fact that he's kept the club well clear of the relegation zone, for most of us, that would be the remit at the start of the season. But God knows what the remit was from Vincent Tan and his board, or more importantly, Vincent Tan individually. We were told at the start of the season that Bullet had a one-year contract with an option of an extension, depending on various, performance-related clauses. So, what were they? We never found out what those were. I think that was mentioned in the first ever press conference. And I mean, if he hasn't hit those, then what were they? We just don't know. This is, we don't know what happened in those conversations at the start of the season between him and the owner. We don't know what the owner demanded. We don't know what he promised. We don't know any of those things. So I think it's impossible to say that he did the job. He's done the job that he was brought here to do. We just don't know.
I mean, the other thing, Dave, obviously, is that it's pretty evident that he was Darman's man.
Yeah.
As opposed to Vincent Tan. So, what's your take on the fact that we're hearing nothing based on the modus operandi of Vincent Tan?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I brought up right from the word go, if you remember, the first time this season on the show. I said that the thing we've got to bear in mind all along is that this was very definitely a Dalman appointment, and Tan has sort of gone along with it, if you see what I mean. It wasn't a Tan appointment that was foisted on the rest of them. So, he's not Tan's man as such. And apparently Lamucci was eventually sent packing because there was a what was the phrase that was used? Not a clash of personalities. It was put more diplomatic than that. But basically, he didn't get on with Vincent Tan.
I'll say what it was. I'll say what I think it was. I think he had opinions.
Well,
yeah,
possibly.
And Errol Bullet clearly has opinions, so I think that's problematic.
Didn't Dalman say that there wasn't chemistry between Lamucci and Tan? Wasn't that the phrase he used? I think that was the phrase he used. So yeah, but this is it. We're sitting here. The fact is that all of this is in the hands of an old man sat in Malaysia, and we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, and we have been doing for months and months and months, and we've been arguing amongst ourselves and having rows. And I don't believe for a moment that 95% of the fans want him to stay. I think there are a significant percentage that want him to stay. Yeah. I think there's a significant percentage that would chip in for his taxi fare to go because they're fed up with the football. I think the vast majority are sat somewhere in the middle, whereby they either are undecided or they don't really care.
Where are you, Dave?
Well, I'm still, I'll throw a tenner in because the football for the vast majority of the season, it was just appalling, and I don't want to watch that again next season. And I don't see any sign that we'll be seeing anything else next season. I said I'll come back to them later, but I've got some interesting stats which paint a picture on the season as it's been. But
you never let us down with stats, Dave. So I'm sure they'll be given.
They're anyway. Ask the same question for Steve first.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask Steve. So far we got one in, one out, one, and I'm not sure. So we'll go to Steve.
Well, you got two out, Steve. Listen, the main reason I tend to, looking back on Saturday's game, I didn't like the way he set his team up. I think the hand was forced to play a couple of youngsters, yes, but I also don't like this two deep sitting midfield players at home, and I think that was the reason the first half, while we were all over the place playing two deep lying midfield players, and we got Rawls and Siopsis in there. And surely to God, at home we need to release the shackles on one of those players and play on the front foot, and that's the reason why. I don't see him. He's a very stubborn guy, I've mentioned before, and I don't think he's going to change his style too drastically. Whoever, if he's kept on, he brings in next season. So personally, for me, I'd chip in for the taxi back to Turkey and take a gamble, because I'm like Dave. I don't think I could stick watching that in, week out. We've won a lot of games, as Simon said, but don't forget, Si, we've also lost a lot of games as well, particularly at home.
Yeah, feast or famine.
Sorry,
you know, we are at the top of the form table or we're bottom of the form table. You know, it's kind of, it feels like there's no in between. The start of the season, you know, top six, then we had a terrible few months, and then again we're back to second in the form table again now.
The crazy thing is we've won more games than any other side outside the top six, I think, and we've lost more games than Huddersfield, who are second from bottom.
Exactly that. So it swings and roundabouts, Dave, isn't it?
Yep.
I would say it's never boring, but it sometimes is. As well. he somehow managed to do that and play boring football, you know. But there we are.
There's an interesting comment from Steve Thomas. Evening, gents. An interesting stat I've seen a few times recently. We've won 19 games a season. Only the top six have won more, which Steve was alluding to then. West Brom in fifth, won 20. Problem is, we've only drawn 5. So I give Errol a chance to push on, having consolidated the season. So again, in the chat, you know, there's people who are for and against. There's lots of comments coming in.
Yeah,
it seems to be very odd. And in a way, it's kind of, I don't know, is it very Cardiff City? Maybe it is. You know, 2 games to go. We still don't know who our manager is next season. If we don't know, if the managers doesn't know, if the players don't know, if the agents don't know, if other available players don't know, you know. It's not a good. It's just not a good look.
Simon, I think, Steve, I was going to say,
yeah.
I don't trust Bullet to make a better appointment. That's the Bullet. I don't trust Tan to make a better appointment.
Yeah.
I would imagine that Tan comes in with bloody Wayne Rooney or something after getting rid of Bullet, and then you kind of back. Then that would be an absolute shocker, wouldn't it? And you don't. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm for Bullet being in, because. And I said this to a friend of mine who's an Aston Villa fan, and he said, "Oh, I love your ambition, but the fact is we don't get relegated under Bullet, and there's a chance of him pushing on. And I guess it's, you know, potentially out of the frying pan into the fire if he gets rid of Bullet. Who does he bring in? Goodness only knows, you know. So boring decision to say Bullet in to a degree, but you know you're going to be fairly safe. And if it doesn't work next season, then get someone else in. You know,
the point that was made earlier, Simon, was trying to think who it was from now. Kind of Reese it was actually. So Reese Evans, I think he's what he's basically saying is, you know, we're kind of blaming Bullet, and he clearly has a kind of way he likes to play. But he said that before he even started. Actually, he didn't make any secret of it. But you know, the players, because of players we've got, we can't play the attractive football.
But the difficulty,
you know, and we haven't really had good football since something like Dave Jones, you know.
The difficulty there, Steve, is that Bullet has brought almost all of these players in, and those that he didn't bring in, he's given extended contracts to. So you can't pretend that this isn't his team. That's the you know, that's the crux of it. If we were in a situation whereby he'd inherited 20 players he couldn't get rid of, and he was allowed to bring in 3 or something, you know, then that argument would hold water. But I think the first player to arrive was Ugbo, I think, who arrived around about sort of a month and a half after Bullet had been appointed. So, you know, all of these players have arrived after Bullet has arrived, and then he's given new contracts to the likes of Wintle, Rawls, NG, Tanner. So you just can't say it's not his team, I don't think.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in, Steve, and say I think it's such a cop-out as well when people say, oh, these players, they can't play football. They're professional players. They can kick a ball 5 meters, 10 meters. And I think that, you know, you see some players, some managers coming in League Two and starting playing really attractive football with their teams. I think if any professional player can play decent football, I mean, watch us on a Wednesday night, the veteran 7-a-side up in Church Village. And we try and pass the ball about without lumping it forward all the time, or, you know, playing it around the back. I just think that's a bit of a cop out to say, well, they're not good enough. They're professional players. They can play, if they're coached properly, they can play decent football. I do believe that.
And to be honest, guys, I mean, I don't know what you all think, but I think we got a pretty decent team on paper. And I look at players, and we touched on this before, Steve, when we've been on together, Dave as well. This inverted wingers, it was just lovely to see Tanner on the left side, Ashford on his right foot, and it makes such a difference if you play players in the position that they're naturally accustomed to. This business of playing a left foot, and Bowler, let's face it, is primarily a left-footed player. I mean, his right leg is just for standing on, really. I mean, so I failed to see, Bullock's stubbornness of playing him on the right hand side, and I think if he'd probably been available Saturday, that's what we would have seen, and that's my big beef with the manager, that he's tried things all season that haven't worked, yet he continues to do those things rather than try something different. And I get the stability thing with Simon. Yes, I get that. But on the flip side of the coin, like Dave, I don't want to watch another season of mediocre, boring, sideways, backwards football at home again.
So were you surprised? I'll stick with you, Steve, for now. When the team, you see the players, you don't necessarily know the formation. When I saw the team, I assumed, quite logically, really, I think, that Tanner would be playing further up the pitch, and maybe Joe Rawls might drop back into left back, which is something that I've argued for a while, because if we've given him a new contract, I know that there's a lot of people don't like what Joe Rawls does, but at his age and with his kind of experience and also his level of fitness these days, I think as a backup left back, it's, and from playing football, Steve, I think that's the kind of role that he could take on more sustainably than trying to be compete with championship pace in midfield. So I was kind of surprised. But then, having said that, Ollie Tanner, for now, Steve, I thought he did really well at left back actually, and Romeo, to his credit, did a good job stepping in on the right too.
Tanner did a great job on Saturday, Steve, but it would have made better sense for me, being the home team, if he wanted to take the game to Southampton, and I don't think we did in the first half, and that's why they created so many chances. It would have made more sense to play Rawls left back and push Tanner further on to get at them, because I think he was a bit of a weapon Saturday. But the main thing, I'm going to go back to it again. Why does Bullock continue to play Colwell wide left as a token gesture? As soon as the kid comes back into 10, the game's transformed and we create chances and we win the game. So stick with Colwell at 10. Always play him at 10. If Ramsey's not available, that's the kid who should be playing at 10. That's the biggest beef I got with the manager. He tends to play him all over the place, and then we'll bring him back in the middle, see if he can change the game. And look what he did Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, Simon, I thought Ruben was great on the weekend. Actually, I thought even he was that good. But despite being attacked with a fire hose before the game, even Russell Martin said he had a good game.
Assaulted, Steve. Is that the word that was used? Assaulted by a sprinkler.
Flagrant misuse of a sprinkler.
And also, you're right.
Ruben looks so good, doesn't he? Don't you think?
He does. Oh, superb! And he's got. I mean, you feel like the team should be the focal point next season and start bringing that youth around him as well, because. It just, I think, you kind of, obviously, young players are quite inconsistent, and therefore, you can't play them all the time. But it just lifts the mood around the place too, doesn't it? Having, rather than bringing in these journeymen from here, there, and everywhere, and loans, and they don't really care about the club. Loans coming in, you can understand why. They're just trying to further their career. But having players in who are from the local area, a boy from the Ronda as well, scoring superb stuff. It does just sort of, I think, lift the mood, and it is a more unlikable person, I think, in football than Russell Martin as well. I mean, his post-match interviews. I mean, there's a few obviously knocking around. There's probably a few in the club, but his post-match interviews. It's a joy to beat his teams just to get that reaction, isn't it?
Yeah, he seemed to take the soaking fairly well, actually. But when you were looking about it, Simon, going back to what Steve said earlier. By the way, somebody's saying they love what Dave has to say, and also you had another one. Hang on, try and see if I can find the comment now. Here we go. One for you, Wiggy, as well. So you both get well received. But when you look at that starting lineup, going back to what Steve said about Ruben, Simon, he obviously wanted to include him. He didn't have an awful lot of option actually, but he wanted to go with his inverted thing, didn't he? So, he went with Mate down the middle, Kean on the right, I think, and Ruben down the left. Now, obviously, Ruben isn't a left winger, but as the game went on, he was able to move around. It was notable when we made substitutions how he's already got that maturity to be quite mobile and adaptive, which is a really good sign. But then we ended up with we had young Louis Giles. I don't know, is he related to the Gilos? I don't know whether he is, but I think he's from Ely in Cardiff, which is nice. And then we had the young lad Conte coming on. And other kids on the bench, and like you said, Simon, because your son plays football to a good standard, who's based in the States now. But how much would it have meant to you to see your son coming through and play for Cardiff City, and how much would it have meant to him to do that? It's something very special about your home club, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you ask any player who's your favourite player of the last 20, 30 years, there's a good chance that in the top 5 at least, there will be some homegrown players.
Well,
maybe
Ernie
not so
be in
much
there, won't
recently. Ernie's always in there. That's exactly the player that came, and Perry and Scott Young, and all of those sort of guys as well will always be in that top 5 for me, because there is that link that you have as a fan to players that are local to you. But you're exactly right, and Steve's right. The big thing with Bullet is that he's a stickler, isn't he? He doesn't seem to learn from his mistakes. He doesn't seem to be particularly flexible. His choices and decisions are sometimes questionable. And it's that. So I'm saying Bullet in because I don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of getting a new manager in.
Yeah.
But there are issues, there are questions that we have to ask of him if he is given a contract. And he does learn. He needs to learn to be more flexible and to change tactics. And when things aren't working, he has to be in a position where he's able to make those changes.
Well,
there's still lots of questions there.
There's a comment coming in now, which I'll come back to you on, Sam, because it's appropriate to you. My God, you guys are negative. Gone from relegation battle to not far from the playoffs. Do you really trust this board to find a better manager? Which we've kind of alluded to a little bit tonight, which goes back to what you're saying, Simon. But it was interesting on the weekend. I was quite surprised, actually. The amount of support there was, I could feel around me for our old Bullet. We wanted to stay and all the stuff going on. And then they asked him to do the Ayatollah, and then he came out and did it, and it was clapping the fans and all the rest of it. It strikes me as he really does want to stay. And could you argue, going back to what you said about the form table, that he's kind of proved his point now? I mean, a couple of wins, and we're like 6 or 7 points off the playoffs at the end of the season. Does his system work? Should we just be happy his system works?
This depends on what Dave said as well, though, doesn't it? What is a good season as far as Tan's concerned? We don't know.
Yeah.
Does Tan want ticky-tacky football, the sort of pep football at Cardiff City, or does Tan want top 10 or an improvement each year? We just don't know. And until we know that, and until there's some kind of communication, I guess we'll never know whether this season is deemed a success in his eyes.
Yeah. Dave, any comments on that?
I mean, the thing is, right, and I know it sounds, people are commenting in the chat about it's negative and all the rest of it, and I totally get that. But I mean, the thing is, I honestly, it's 50 years for me next year as a supporter.
I am sorry.
I still not forgiven my father. I've not seen a City team win so many games, fortunately, in a season, and I've not seen a City team that has gone for so long without actually in any game whereby you could come away and say, oh, well, we were comfortably the better side there today. Even when the team has been in desperate relegation trouble, and even when it has been relegated, the odd game every now and again, you get a situation whereby you can come away and say, we deserve the 3 points there today. We did it. I'll come back to those stats that I was going to give you earlier. It's now been 30 league games since City last beat any side by 2 goals or more. Okay? Now, there's only one team in the entire top 5 divisions who's got a worse record than that at the moment, and that's Rotherham United. In every other division, that is the longest run without beating anybody by 2 goals or more. And it really goes back to that Bristol City game in late October, which was the last time that City beat a side and were comfortably the better team on the day. And it hasn't mattered whether they're playing the top sides, the bottom sides. They just seem to squeeze past people every now and again. And then you've got another stat. It's now been 31 games since City scored 3 goals in a game in the league. And if they fail to score 3 against Middlesbrough on Saturday, that will equal the club record for the length of a win in the club's entire history.
Yeah.
And it's funny, the team that holds the record of 32, I'll come back to that later because it's bizarre. But when you combine those two things, 30 games since we last beat anybody by 2 clear goals. During that time, we've been beaten by 2 clear goals on 12 occasions.
Right.
And it's 31 games since we've last scored 3 goals against anybody.
Okay.
We've conceded 3 or more on 7 occasions during that time.
Okay.
It's just these sort of last minute, injury time goals out of nothing. 2 own goals.
They're great though, aren't they?
It's all great. It's great when it happens, but it's not something that you could say is sustainable in the long run, because you're not going to get many more seasons like this.
So Dave, just to follow up on what you're saying, there's a really, really good point. I've got a comment coming in from someone now. At one point, used to be your arch nemesis, who's come in with an unusual comment, which surprises me. It might surprise you too. But I'll put it out there. I think the reason we don't score many goals is because we don't create many chances.
Well, no.
And if we've got inverted wingers down both sides, and Mate, who's not a striker, and we don't have much in the way of strikers, how are you going to score goals, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's the setup, and that's just the way it's been for almost all of the season.
Yeah. So Jeff Dela Cruz, Dave, they're okay now, but they had a little run-in on social media a while back. He lives in Ireland now, but he's quite shocking me with this comment. I've been firmly in the breaking news. I've been firmly in the bullet out camp practically all season. Now I think he probably deserves a contract. It's taken him a long time to adjust to the championship, but I sensed the penny drop. So shock news on the Cardiff City phone in. Jeff Dela Cruz calling for bullet to stay. Steve, I'll go to you, Steve. How do you feel about this?
Jeff, I'm absolutely shocked at that, pal. I got to say, after having to chat you behind the scenes, but I got to disagree, because I don't think he has learned. And to go back to Dave's stats, Bullet sets his teams out to contain, Steve. He doesn't set his teams out to win games, and there's the issue there. And that's the biggest beef I've got of all is. We don't get at teams. I mean, if we'd had a pop of Southampton in the first half, who knows what we could have done. But that side, again, on Saturday was set up to basically contain. It was almost as if we were waiting for Southampton to do something, to score a goal, and then if they get that goal, then we'll change things. But why not have a go at teams? Why not get at teams? And that's my biggest beef. And I'm surprised at Jeff, to be honest, because if you're obviously watching that game Saturday, as we've said earlier, I know people say we're negative, but let's be brutally honest. As we've said, we could have been 4. It was men against boys first half. If they'd taken all their chances, we're 4-1 down. And I think Jeff's attitude maybe would have been on the other side of the fence. Who knows?
Okay, so what about the comment? Maybe we can respond to this and whiz around on it. Kyle, Bullet has the best win percentage in the last 10 managers. Football's a results game. I'd rather us play boring football and win than play like Man City and lose all the time. Few words from you, Steve, then I go to Simon and Dave on that.
I'd just like to see a bit of entertainment, especially at home, Steve. I think if you're paying big money, which we are these days, to watch football, then we need to be entertained. And we've not been entertained at home at all this year.
I do agree. 100%, yeah. And it's also possible to do both. This question is also set up sometimes to say, well, I'd rather be doing this than that. And you think, well, why can't we play nice football and win?
And the thing is,
struggle to do that. We have struggled a lot to do that, haven't we?
Yeah. We'll never know, though, Si. We'll never know unless we actually have a go. And that's the major issue with Bullet. We don't have a go at teams. Set your teams out at home to win a game. So play one in front of the back 4 and then let the other midfielder, let Ruben do his thing. Let's try and beat teams rather than wait for teams to score first and we're chasing the game all the time. That's the issue.
Dave?
I mean, you know, the comment, I understand where he's coming from. He'd rather play boring football and win than play entertaining football and lose. But the fact is that City have played boring football and lost 20 times this season. We've lost more games than Huddersfield, who are a second from bottom. So it's not a case of whereby they're winning games and then they're cancelling teams out by negative football and just drawing matches. They're not. It's either win or lose. And a lot of the victories, we have to be realistic. There's no point in sort of just looking at it and saying a win's a win. We've all been watching football for decades. We know that a lot of these victories have been very, very fortunate. A couple of the defeats have been unfortunate earlier in the season. But overall, these things are supposed to balance out over the course of a season, and I don't think they have this season,
Okay. Well, we've got quite a lot of other stuff to get through. There's some stuff which has been happening, which we need to talk about as well. So we'll have to see. But it is totally bizarre. I think that 2 games to go. It's totally bizarre that there's been no comment on it. The other thing which is a little bit weird, Dave, while I'm talking to you, is Alnick, NG, JC, Wilson, Esbrand, McGuinness, Tete, Bowler, Grant, Robinson. The number of injuries that we've got, and of those players, particularly, I guess KG, you probably never see him again. Wilson, Esbrand, probably never see him again. Those players, so many players. Wonder why we're getting all these injuries, and they're out long-term injuries.
I think realistically,
Dowder, of course.
Yeah, I think realistically, before looking at that in any depth, you'd need to see what the injuries are. I mean, if you had a whole raft of
I'd like to see a breakdown. Yeah,
a whole raft of hamstring injuries, for instance, then you would look at training methods or whatever. But how do you say this again? It's very difficult to phrase these things gently without upsetting people. Let's be honest, Aaron Ramsey, playing hardly any games this season, will not have sent shockwaves through the world of football.
Can I just hold you there with that very thought? Because Mark Pontin says, has the Ramsey experiment failed, and should he hang up his boots, Dave Sugarman?
I mean, a lot of people have said he's a big influence behind the scenes. Well, you would imagine he could be a big influence behind the scenes with not being a player. If they gave him some sort of role behind the scenes. I think it's entirely down to the player. He's a sensible lad, but I just can't see it getting another season out of him next season where he's going to play anything more than a handful of games. It's not a surprise to anybody, surely, that this is the way it's worked out this season. And to a lesser degree, it's the same with O'Dowda. O'Dowda last season had a couple of spells out injured, but last season was one of his in terms of appearances, was one of his best in his career.
I love O'Dowda, by the way.
He's been injury plagued throughout his entire career. He seems, one of those players who's just as long spells injured at various points in time. So the thing is, you can't build a team around these players. You can't go into a season relying on them being there for the majority of the season when their careers suggest they're not going to be.
So I've got some.
Go on, Sam.
I was just going to say, I pulled a muscle getting off the toilet the other day, so I've complete empathy for Ramsey. It's a terrible.
Was that a hamstring injury?
I won't tell you what muscle. But yeah, you're right.
Steve,
go on.
I was going to chip one in. I can see us getting another season out of Ramsey, but I think it might be in the manager's office.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting then.
I personally, I don't know anything, but I personally think that maybe Mr. Tan's been having conversations with Aaron Ramsey with a view to player manager, whatever role you want to call. But to be brutally honest, I wouldn't be averse to that. I think that would be even though yes, he hasn't done his badges or whatever, but I know he's doing his badges. But something like that inspires me for next season. I don't know what the guys think, but
do you remember we played Fulham with Simon Howarth? Scored 2 away when they were chasing for the Division 3 title. I don't know. We won 4-1 away, one of the best aways I went to. Well, we had 2 managers on that night, and that's quite a rare thing. So, are we thinking Wayne Rooney and Aaron Ramsey next season? Is that what we're thinking Tan's going to do for us to take us back to the glory days? Well, but no, I don't think it's a bad idea. Actually, it's not a bad thought.
Wayne Rooney's a bad idea.
Yeah, I think the Ramsey idea is a good one. Who he brings in with him, I don't know, but I'm just surmising that maybe conversations have been going on behind the scenes. That's why the silence has been deafening with Bullet, and perhaps things are already in progress. Who knows? We don't know.
Stephen Hurd made a really good comment earlier. He was talking about, and we did sort of nod towards it earlier, just scream Sabri Lamucci all over again, we heard nothing, and then he was gone, and he goes on to say that until we can find a yes man who can do what Warnock did, was doing it on a shoestring budget, so we'll have to see about that. But also that comment on the screen there, which maybe we can just run quickly on that. Go with you, Dave, first. Last popular manager at Cardiff City.
Malky Mackay was extremely popular during his first season, and he was extremely popular during his second season for those who hung around once Tan had done what he did to the club, which didn't include me. But, he was extremely popular for his first 2 seasons. People forget that. It all turned sour once they got to the Premier League. But, Malky Mackay, at the end of his second season, they were talking about him being poached by Everton and God knows what, and and all this, and he was a popular manager for the first 2 seasons here. There's no doubt about it. As I say, it went sour, but he was definitely a popular manager for the first 2 seasons.
There's a couple of other things which we should talk about. We should really talk about this one. In the story in the press today to do with Salah. And reading between the lines from what's obviously been communicated, that the club seem fairly confident that they're going to be successful in terms of getting some cash back on recompense is a better way of putting it, really, and that they'll implicate the other party. But Dave, you were talking about this before the show, and you were saying, of course, it opens the doors, doesn't it, to people, negativity towards Cardiff City Football Club to some extent as well, doesn't it? I mean, it's just totally kind of subjective, of course. Yeah.
Look, and I'm not even joking with this one. This is the things I would like to say on this subject.
Okay.
I just can't say.
Don't say them.
I can't say because I think the whole thing is just absolutely farcical, and I've thought that for several years. And there's lots of points I would like to make, but the way certain people in certain positions are at the club, I think I'll just zip it.
Okay. Yeah. It's difficult to obviously it's still going through, but the only thing we can't really ignore it because it's really, really big. I mean, the whole thing is totally tragic and appalling, but it seems as if the indications are, Steve, that the club think they're going to be successful in their legal battle. So,
I just wish we'd let sleeping dogs lie there, Stephen. And that's no disrespect to anyone, but it's been dragging on for so long, hasn't it? And it looks like it's going to be drawn out a bit further again. But as you said at the start of there, it's dragging the club. The club's name is going to be dirt through the mud again. If we get, if they come down on our side and we get a load of money, then
it's just difficult.
What can you say? Yeah,
it's a horribly tragic case, and there's a lot of emotion involved, and that's why, as well, there's so much abuse on the socials around it. But I'm looking at it from the outside, looking at the podcasts and the documentaries and reading the pieces in the paper. But you can argue that the only party, apart from obviously what happened there, that the party that really didn't have much to do with the tragic flight, etc., was Cardiff City, and Nance and the dodgy, questionable agent obviously got involved with booking a flight that shouldn't have been booked with the pilot who couldn't fly at night and all these other
allegedly dodgy. I suppose
allegedly. I think he is officially now, isn't he? It's now what came out of the court case. But there's so many terrible things that happened. It's
dreadful.
It's not a good look. It's not a good look at all. But I can kind of understand. And I wonder if Tan is hanging around until this has been completed as well, possibly. And that's my thoughts that maybe he's waiting around to see if there is a bit of a payout at the end of it before he moves the club on.
In another way of looking at it, it is such a massive kind of seismic moment in the history of the football club that, you'd think that Vincent Tan would stick around to conclude the matter, anyway. I know I'm being really diplomatic there, but you'd hope there would be an element of that as well.
What's come out as well is, just to quickly say, is obviously that Cardiff did pay, gave money to the family and also set up a I've forgotten the word of it, sort of a charity,
a trust
in Salah's name as well. And I don't believe any other clubs involved or people involved did that either. And yet, that won't get coverage on social media because it's not a big story. But there were things that the club did too.
And one of the nice things, probably the only nice thing that I can think of at all in any shape or form has come out of it, Dave. I think there's been quite a lot of kind of fraternity between Cardiff City and non-fans, actually, which has been, there's been some positivity there, which is good. Let's go back to the Ramsey thing. So Geraint Cole says Ramsey should do the right thing and terminate his contract. I'm kind of glad you said that, Geraint, because I wanted to ask Dave something similar to this. The club can hardly afford his wages if he's not playing. So what I was going to ask you, Dave, do you think, Aaron Ramsey, with the kind of stature and legacy he has in the game, is he the kind of guy, because I think he is, who'll just say, look, this ain't working out. I'm not fair. I'm just taking, I'm taking the money, let's pull things to a close here,
It'll depend entirely on his own mindset in how he's feeling physically, because I noticed, when he went off, the last time we saw him, was it the Birmingham game? I don't know. He went off at half time.
Yeah. He didn't look right at all, did he?
And he didn't look right, and he was asking the referee how much longer was to go. Sort of 10 minutes before half time in that game. I noticed several times him going up to the ref and asking him, and the ref looking at the watch. And I think he, he's a decent guy. Everything we know about him suggests he's a decent guy. If he thinks he's not going to be able to get through next season, I think he will call it a day. But then you could have a situation whereby mentally he just thinks he's been unlucky again this season, because his appearances the previous season were reasonable in numerical terms. But I guess only he'll know that, But,
Steve?
It's possible.
Yeah, personally, Steve, I think he's a sensible kid. Like the rigors of the championship. The championship, it's a very demanding league. I think he probably knows it's time to call it a day, and that's why I think he's moving or leaning more towards getting the badges, doing some coaching, and that's why personally I think for us it'd be a good move to get him involved in some way, shape or form on the management side, because don't forget he's got very good connections as well, Steve.
Yeah. Director of football, as Jeff says, potentially. But then Tan doesn't want one, does he?
Can I just say, Jeffrey Dela Cruz says Ramsey is director of football first, then coach.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's back in Cardiff anyway, isn't he? He's made his base. He's made his feelings known that he wants to be here with his children and his family, which is fair enough. So his base is in Cardiff. He's a Cardiff boy. He's a Cardiff City player. He's a Cardiff City. It's blue in his blood. You think that'd be the most logical move for him to, in some capacity, to be involved on the management side with a view, maybe I don't know, he might hang up his boots completely, but he might just keep them there if he fancies an odd game. I don't know, but I can see him. I can certainly see him somewhere in our setup as coach or manager, maybe next season.
Simon, how old is your lad now?
24, amazingly.
24 now. Wow, I remember I was a little boy, just a wee lad, but
running around the basement in Treforest. Yeah,
he's in America now. He's done football coaching stuff and all the rest of it. So I'm thinking about Aaron, with his son. Is that another kind of perspective on it?
It feels like he's embedded himself into the club a little bit in that respect as well. I mean, as a fan, I love seeing Aaron Ramsey. We haven't seen him much, but it's just a fantastic thing to see him on the field and having that opportunity for next season. It's a luxury. Yeah, and what Dave said is you can't base your team around him, and that's absolutely fair. And there's no way in the world you should do. But I'd like to see him given another season. I know Chris in the chat has said that give him a pre-season, see how he feels, etc., before he makes his decision. Because as a fan, I don't really care what wages he's on, because that's not my thing. I don't want the club to go bankrupt, but actually that doesn't bother me whatsoever. Having him play 15 games, 20 games next season would be a massive plus to us, especially if we're having those younger players coming through and we're talking about, youth. Then someone like Ramsey would be a massive plus. But as Steve says as well, that experience may well be on the coaching side. But I hope to see him next season in the Cardiff shirt, and I hope to see him in a few games because, my God, when he's an absolute class above everyone on that field when he's fit and firing, which unfortunately hasn't been too much.
Well, that's interesting with the Wales stuff, Simon, as well, wasn't it? Because he was in the squad for those last 2 games, but he just sat there on the bench and did nothing. If he's there because he has this kind of gravitas, if you like, in the game and experience.
Yeah.
You don't
One of many questions to ask of Robert Page, realistically, after the playoffs. And we can hark back to the qualification campaign as well, especially when, why wouldn't you bring him on even with 3 minutes to go to potentially take a penalty? I don't know. I mean, he's
absolutely,
cold, possibly,
I thought that's when he would come on. Yeah, it was obvious to me.
And what's the point of having him there?
Don't forget with Ramsey as well. Sorry, Steve. With Ramsey as well, he's worked under one of the best coaches in the world in Wenger. So that's going to be installed upstairs in Ramsey, and that's the reason why personally I'd like to see him involved in a managerial capacity somewhere.
Well, there's your director of football. Arsene Wenger is not doing much, is he?
Well, I didn't want to mention that, but I'd take stick if I mentioned that. But who knows? Perhaps if he's at a bit of a loose end and he fancies a bit of Joe's ice cream, we might get him in Wales.
You never know. We do actually, but anyway. So a couple of things to mention. Other topics that are going around at the moment, which are more general football things. One of them is to do with the coverage of the EFL next season by Sky, and also the impact on Cardiff City kind of match day coverage. And the other one, which almost goes in hand with it, is the idea of, which I think more contentious, really, FA Cup replays. Like if we were a lower League 1, League 2 side, and you manage to say in Newport County, right? You manage to, or Wrexham, you manage to get to the 3rd round, and then you play against some huge Premiership club, Dave, and by hook or by crook, Newport County, maybe the pitch is a little bit, they might get a draw, and then they get the chance of going to Anfield or whatever. And all that revenue, and how it's a lifesaver for clubs at that level. What's your thoughts on it? Can you kind of see it from both arguments? Is it just reality?
I can see it from the perspective of lower league clubs, but the point is there's just too much football these days. There's too much football across the board. We've reached the stage with the FA Cup where mid-ranking League 1 sides are putting out shadow teams in the FA Cup 3rd round. That happened several times this season. We've got a situation where everybody automatically blames the big boys for things like this when it happens. And of course, they're the drivers behind it. So that's justified to a degree. But the truth of the matter is Manchester City put out stronger teams in the FA Cup than Cardiff City do. We haven't taken this competition seriously for, we go back to when Malky Mackay was manager and they were in the Premier League. They sent the reserves for the FA Cup.
They still won, didn't they?
No. I think that wasn't when they were in the Premier League. Sorry, it was when they were in the Championship and they went to Macclesfield, I think, and got knocked out.
Yeah. Look at Liverpool kids.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's simply too much football. The League Cup has long since passed its sell-by date, as far as I'm concerned. FA Cup ties. They should be one-offs as far as I'm concerned, and the whole European setup don't even start on that. That's
the issue, isn't it? I mean, this is the problem. Is that we got this mafia in the Premier League who obviously have huge control over. Allegedly, again. The 3% of the clubs are making a decision for everyone. The issue is, you're right, Dave, that the amount of football is ridiculous, especially at that sort of top end. But then there's this European competition next season, which will see X amount more games. And then they're going away to Bangkok, Thailand for pre-season, traveling around the world. They're saying, well, we want to save time here, but they're not helping themselves in other areas either.
No. I understand. I understand why people reach that conclusion. Immediately. That's obviously the situation. But City aren't playing in Europe, and City sent the reserves to Sheffield Wednesday. City were a mid-table Championship side. With very little chance of going down and very little chance of going up, and yet we send the reserves for an FA Cup 3rd round team, and we're not the only club that does that. So something has got to give. Something's got to change.
Well, Stephen Hurd's come up with a brilliant one there. It wasn't originally his comment. Best comment he came across was about replays. Put all the teams in round one. As soon as you make round one, you can get Man United, Man City, whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why not? Yeah.
I hear that. Why not seed them from round one? So you got your Prems against your lower leagues then, and then give them the choice of home or away. It's that comment as well. Was thrown in.
It's a pity with the cup, isn't it? Because I mean, we all grew up. The FA Cup was the romance of the cup was always the minnows. If we drew against X team, then you had the chance to play them on their own patch, go up to Highbury, go up to Old Trafford, go to Liverpool, and that was the romance of the cup. But like Dave says, I mean, it's just what they've done with the European leagues and all these games, additional games they're playing. That's where the saturations come from, and now there's football on all the time. I've got to be perfectly frank. The European games, I hardly watch them. I find them boring. I actually find the Champions League boring, but I still love the FA Cup. And look at that game on Sunday.
Well,
I mean, I flicked over when United were 3 up, only to watch a bit of the Liverpool game, and I fell asleep in the end there, Steve. But I mean, there's the romance of the Cup there. A team coming back, and really they were unlucky not to get through to the final. And like Dave said, if we'd have potentially played a side up at Sheffield Wednesday, who knows? That could have been us there yesterday, but we didn't, and that was the club's choice, Yeah,
we will always have that romance for me. The FA Cup. The first game I ever watched was 1987, Coventry Tottenham. I think as a kid, that's the first game I can remember, and that was it. After that, I loved football, and I was obsessed. And actually, because no one in my family was a football or Cardiff fan, so I kind of watched that. My dad the next week brought home a Coventry top because he saw that I was watching the game. And so the first top I ever had was a Coventry top. At least it was blue. Then you look at Man City. Some of the games. I mean, most of the games I can remember were linked to the FA Cup. I think for me as a fan, it still has that romance. But as Dave's saying, for managers and club owners, I don't think that kind of ideal exists. But for us fans, it's still huge, I think.
There's a comment here from Steve Thomas, Dave, which is quite interesting, going back to the 3 o'clock thing. And he says it's a bit concerning if we have less 3 p.m. Saturday kickoffs with the new Sky deal. The last people thought about are the fans who travel to games, and football is nothing without the fans. It is a balancing act, isn't it?
It is, and I got to be honest. I haven't really looked in detail at the latest details of the Sky deal at all. But yeah, it's not going to be good for travelling fans again. But we've been those of us, and I got to be honest. I haven't travelled away for a couple of years now. But those who travelled away regularly were always last on the list of the people who were considered when the fixtures were being drawn up. It's not as if that's a new thing. It just looks like it gets progressively worse. But it's not great.
But it gives
and they thinking of sorry, Dave. Aren't they thinking of playing games on a Thursday, Steve? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I think that's what I read.
All right, spreading it across. Yeah, no, I hadn't seen that bit actually.
Didn't I hear as well? Just for clarity, they said the FA Cup now is going to only be played on the weekend, but the weekend is Friday to Wednesday. So, I'll tell my boss that I'll be in after the weekend on Thursday.
Great comment. I recommend everyone get themselves a VPN. That's what.
VPN.
I suppose.
What's that? Visible panty line, is it?
Something like that. Yeah. Well, it might as well be. But I mean, the point is, I suppose it creates a bit of a quandary, Steve, for fans, doesn't it? Buy a ticket for City's kind of important season, or spend a few quid on Sky, and you can watch your championship games Wednesday to Sunday or whatever it is. So it's a bit of a quandary with that one as well. Actually, do you think that result on the weekend, because it was exciting, it was a great result, and it was a bit of a buzz, which is is it the kind of thing which might make people think, oh, go on, we'll get that season ticket after all,
Well, I don't know what the other guys have here, but a lot of my friends are still very much and waiting to see the situation with the manager, because I got to be honest, a few of them have even stopped going down and weren't there Saturday because they can't bear the thought of watching what we've watched in the main for the past since October. So that I think that's one of the big issues, isn't it? With Mr. Chan. I don't know whether he's thinking that the entertainment and the fair put on is going to push support away. But it's an interesting one for sure.
The problem you've got there, Steve, is you've tried to use the words "what Tan is thinking."
Yeah,
I don't think we've done that since day one. Have we on any subject at all?
Well, let me just hold you there because we're right towards the end of the show. And there's two really great comments. I want to quickly go around on one of these actually. One of them is from Rob Lee. Rob, I'll come to your question in a second. The point was made by the fabulously named John Bartley Wilson Stubbs. Why didn't the top 6 go into that European Super League when they had the chance? They wouldn't be missed, and the FA Cup could stay the same. So, well said. That's comment of the night. And then Rob asked this question, and I want to quickly go around on this, right? So Rob says, the question that's never answered is, what are your expectations concerning Cardiff City? I want to know what the panel's expectations are for this season and next season. Funny enough, I didn't even have aspiration on the weekend. I just thought we'd definitely lose. But, anyway, looking further to the future. Dave, first.
This season, I hoped and expected mid-table football, and I desperately hoped for some entertainment after some poor previous couple of seasons, and to be honest, I found this season the most tedious of the last 3. As regards next season, I would just like to see some progressive football. I would like to see some signs. Again, I'm completely happy with mid-table because I think it's going to take a couple of years to actually generate any sort of genuine forward progress. I just want to see some entertaining football, and I want to see some sign of progression in terms of the way the team is playing.
It looks like Simon can't even dare to compliment it. No, he's back. He's all right. Simon, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the key word has always been progress for me, and that was why until fairly recently I was kind of on the fence with Bullock, because again, you just want to see progress. Well, I want to see some of the young players coming through next season.
Yep.
I'd love to see some positive football as well. Realistically, top 10, I'm not really particularly bothered about. Do you know, I don't want to go to the Premier League. I just never enjoy the I don't want to go there. No. I just want nice football. I want young players from the Rhondda coming through and scoring goals. I want a happy smile. I want to smile when I'm leaving the stadium. And I don't want to be, I'm happy with the playoffs-ish, but I don't want to go up. I don't want promotion. The Championship's the best league in the world, honestly.
Yeah.
I love it there.
Steve, final comment to you?
I agree with that. Sorry, that's spot on. For me, I just want to see goals. I want to see excitement, and I want to see the team get me off my seat. And I want to see a 5 or a 6-0 like we used to have in the olden days.
Well, on that point, we'll leave it there for tonight. Thanks all. Great show. See you soon. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers, Steve. Cheers, guys.